And the African Union is very concerned about these allegations of sexual misconduct in South Sudan. It says they'll have major implications for peacekeeping operations across Africa.
Any misbehavior in the mission area really does have an impact on the credibility of the mission, because we are moving from the premise that our presence in these areas is to help the local communities, to help the local state to build its capacities, to build its credibilities. So any negative work or any misdemeanor or any action that leads to perceived criminal activity or perceived misbehavior has a very negative image on our missions. Hence, it has become critical that we continue to strive to ensure that we have zero tolerance for any misbehavior or any misdeed in the mission area.
Well, peacekeepers from at least 21 nations have been accused of sexual abuse. Official UN statistics show over 600 women and children have been sexually abused or exploited, but officials believe the real figure is up to 10 times that. Since the beginning of last year, 21 cases filed related to children. Most of them claim the abusers left them pregnant. In 2006, peacekeepers in Liberia and Haiti were accused of forcing girls to perform sexual favors in return for food. 2 years later, researchers from Save the Children found UN peacekeepers in Côte d'Ivoire, South Sudan and Haiti had raped children as young as 13. While the UN has demanded forces committing crimes be held to account, only 30 troops have been jailed. Under the current rules, the UN has no authority to prosecute peacekeepers serving at its missions. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by CGTN's Nick Harper in New York. Nick, of course, just starting with this most recent incident, has there been any official response from the UN regarding the sexual misconduct of members of a Ghanaian police unit deployed in South Sudan?
There has, Lindy, and we are expecting more response from the United Nations any moment now. Here at the UN headquarters, the lunchtime briefing by the UN Secretary-General's spokesman, Stefan Dujarric, is meant to get underway any moment now, and we're being told that he will be reading out a statement from the DPKO, the UN's peacekeeping operation, directly responding to those allegations. But we've also heard from the United Nations mission in South Sudan. The head there, David Shearer, has put out a statement. He has said that the mission has a zero tolerance, no excuses and no second chances approach to sexual exploitation and abuses. He's also said that it is a clear breach of the UN and the South Sudan mission's code of conduct if these allegations are proved to be true. We already know that the UN mission in South Sudan has reported what has happened to the UN headquarters here in New York. They've spoken to the Ghanaians, and on top of that, they've taken a very direct, concrete measure of removing that policekeeping unit from WOW, bringing them back to the capital, Juba. So 46 members of that policekeeping unit from Ghana are now back in Juba, and we are expecting more response from the UN headquarters very soon.
And Nick, of course, we know that the UN has now warned that there are serious human rights violations by parties involved in South Sudan's internal conflict. What more can you tell us about this?
That's right. So we've got this as well, a separate report that's been put together by the Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan. It's a special independent panel that looks at those rights violations in the country. It's amassed a huge amount of documents, about 58,000, spoken to more than 200 people to try and build a picture of the situation. And they say that what they found, some of the violations there, may amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes. They've also, in this report, detailed 40 individuals within the government's military that they say are behind these atrocities. They've detailed things like child recruitment for soldier units, massacres, cruelty against civilians, lots of sexual violations as well. They're presenting that report to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, and they're due to meet at the beginning of next month to discuss that and try and work out next steps for the situation in South Sudan.
And Nick, of course, with these allegations of sexual misconduct levelled at UN peacekeepers, we've seen them in Liberia and Haiti and now South Sudan. To what extent is this affecting the credibility of the UN and its peacekeepers in the countries where they operate?
Well, Lindy, I think it affects the credibility in a very big way. As you mentioned there, it is not just South Sudan. This isn't an isolated incident. There have been dozens of other allegations right across several African countries that span a whole array of years. Now, the United Nations is trying to say, in terms of this incident, that there is no indication the behaviour is more widespread in the South Sudan mission. They say that it is just confined to this one police unit, suggesting that it's a case of some bad apples ruining the whole barrel. And when you look at the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, you have to remember there's about 17,000 peacekeeping personnel there, and this is just a small unit, but of course it is just another in a very long list that are potentially undermining the credibility of the UN missions spread across a whole host of African nations.
Well, Nick Harper, thank you so much for joining us there live from New York. Of course, we are expecting that lunchtime briefing, further response to these allegations of sexual misconduct in South Sudan.